Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Wave Podcast. We are here to talk to you guys today about Transformers 1. This is going to be our full spoiler discussion about the film. If you guys haven't seen the movie yet and you want to see our non-spoiler thoughts, that's up on the channel right now. But I'm going to be one of your hosts for this episode. My name is Darian Scallamoni. I am joined by Mark Jacobino.
How's it going, everyone?
We usually talk Star Wars.
Yeah.
We're jumping into a world in which more meets the eye, Mark.
That's really good. That's really good.
So this is an animated prequel, and the last Transformers movie that came out, I think it was last year, was Rise of the Beasts. I have Optimus Primal right here, and that movie they were hoping to sort of reboot the franchise with, start over. They kept it in live action, and they brought in like Anthony Ramos, and I'm trying to it's the actress from Swarm, Dominique Fishback, with the two leads for that project, and that movie did not do as well in theaters, didn't do as well in terms of box office. And the initial live action movies that Michael Bay had done, regardless of their critical reception, always made a boatload of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the sort of patience on the franchise wore thin, and they decided that they were going to bring in a new writer's room, which I think they did in like 2019. And one of the ideas that came to fruition was this animated prequel called Transformers 1. So broad thoughts, and again, like we said, we're talking spoilers, so you've been warned. What were your overall broad thoughts on this movie when you checked it out?
Yeah. I thought this movie was very okay. I enjoyed the voice acting. The voice acting was great, surprisingly so, with Chris Hemsworth playing Optimus Prime, who is so synonymous with that other voice that he's voiced all the time by that one guy. But I think, Chris Hemsworth comes in and does a great job. I think the story is a little too predictable. I think from the first, 5 minutes, I knew exactly where this story was going to go in all facets of it, especially with like Sentinel Prime, that whole betrayal and everything like that. I appreciated the world building. It gets me interested. I think it's a little exposition heavy, but I am interested in seeing where it goes. I like seeing the Transformers without having to be bogged down by human characters and just focusing on their conflicts. And the humor just was not good. I didn't laugh once. I mean, there was maybe like once or twice I was like, okay. But overall, I thought the humor was it didn't land for me. And I think that was coming down to the issue of they didn't know which way they wanted to go, if they wanted this to be a more mature story, because there are mature elements to this, or if they wanted this to be a pure kids movie. And I think because they didn't pick a side, it kind of suffers from being in the middle. And I think if they did go full like mature tone, I think this would have been a really great movie. And I think it would have been a really important animated movie that kind of pushed the boundaries of a traditional child story in animation is now given a more mature setting and tone. And I think that would have been awesome, but you got to make your money. And I know that studios, when they see animation, they're like, well, we have to appeal to the kids. We have to get the biggest demographic. So I think that held it back a bit, but I am excited for future sequels if there are any. I know you mentioned that the box office hasn't been great.
Yeah, I think that my takeaway from this movie is similar to yours, but I do think that the humor hit a little bit more for me. But I do think the story is, despite how simple it may be, and you were talking about the world building, that's what really got me really interested in this movie. Having seen previous live action iterations of this franchise, I wasn't a huge fan of the way that Michael Bay took it. A lot of people weren't. I've never seen the original 80s cartoon, but a lot of people swear by it and say it's like that's why there's so much cachet and desire for them to do this the right way, because there's so much in that original sort of series that they created.
Yeah.
And I thought that getting to understand the world of the primes and the spirituality that comes with it, and just all these like I love how you brought up not being bogged down by the humans, because there's so many Transformers in this movie, like that you've even heard of, that I know for years there were fans that were clamoring. They're like, when are we going to get this Transformer? And when are we going to get this one? No, this sets up the world where you're just in a world of Transformers. That's it. Yeah. You don't need human characters to operate them or drive the cars around. You don't need that. And you actually see them not in their car form for so much of the film. And I think the action also benefits from that. Eventually when they get the transforming powers, but they don't start that way. Right. It's basically an origin story for Optimus Prime and Megatron, where they don't even have the names Optimus Prime and Megatron. It's Orion Pax and D16. Which again, you brought up, Hemsworth plays Optimus, and Brian Tyree Henry, who's probably best known for Atlanta, and he's also Phastos in Eternals. He plays D16. And I just really enjoyed what they were able to create. And I know you had talked about you thought it was sort of predictable, but for me, I thought the simple story worked because it was effective. I thought that so much of the time, and I think it's weird because maybe it's just because I have such a bad taste in my mouth from the previous Transformers movies, like the humor they tried to implement in those movies didn't work at all. Like for me either.
Brutal. I think the first one's so funny.
Really?
It's so funny. When they go, who is it, Bernie Mac? They go buy the used car from him. Oh my god.
Well, again, Bernie Mac is a legend, but it's like they try to do things like I always think of like John Turturro's character in the live action Transformers, and like he could do great comedic work, but it's like the scripts are bad, in my opinion, for all the live action Transformers movies. And regardless, though, this might be a more simple story. I think that a lot of the interactions between the characters, maybe with the exception of Bumblebee, which we'll get into, it works for me. So I actually really enjoyed this movie, but I can understand, and I actually agree with you in terms of the marketing of this movie. I think Paramount hamstrung themselves. I don't think they knew what direction they were going to go in. And the first trailer that I saw for this movie made me not want to see this movie. Like, I remember it being, I was like, this just feels like they're making this for 13-year-olds. And like, what 13-year-olds even know what the Transformers are at this point? You know what I mean? Like, the franchise has been so dead for such a while. And the original series started in the 80s. Like, that's not something that the young people are going to cling on to anyway. Yeah. But what this movie gives you is this mixture of mixing in childish humor with really serious, mature, effective themology, especially with the two leads, Optimus and Megatron. And I'm curious because you had brought up in our non-spoiler, you're like, we'll talk about it in the spoiler talk, the relationship between the two characters. I thought it worked really well. I think you had some criticism with it.
Yeah, I think it overall worked really well, but I think later on in the film, Megatron kind of devolves into, well, throughout most of the first like 3/4, maybe first half, he's very like, let's not do this, and then one line gets said, and then he's like, okay, let's do this, I'm in. And I appreciate that that's part of his character, that he's very like on protocol, like he follows everyone in all facets of his life because he trusts the system, and then the system goes against him, and he's like, screw the system, I'm tearing everything down. So I see the vision of his arc, but I think it's a little sloppy in the middle and later half where his character just flips a switch, and I feel like there could have been some more moments where there would have been a little bit better of a gradual character turn with him and Optimus, but it feels like at one point he just completely switches, and anytime Optimus tries to reach out to him, he just blocks him off, when I feel like if you were best friends with someone, you'd be able to talk through it maybe a little. I mean, there would be some tension because they have different worldviews, but I think they would be able to talk through it a bit more. But it just feels like at one point they just run into each other, and then that's it. Like their friendship kind of ends. Yeah, it's weird.
I think that I would agree with what you're saying. I think the turning point of when Megatron turns is kind of out of nowhere. The build up after he turns, though,
yes,
I actually kind of like how he becomes devoid of anything that Optimus is standing for, because it's so much about the individuality of what his character is and how he feels about the way that the system cheated him, because so much of what Optimus is don't listen to anybody about anything ever, which is kind of interesting because in the live action movies, I think it's kind of the opposite. Right. Like Optimus is very much like about the history, and in the first scene of the movie is a heist. It's Optimus trying to go in to understand the ancient history of the Primes, but he's breaking protocol completely. And it's like the Optimus Prime that we would know from the live action films would never do something like that. Like he stands by exactly what the lineage of the story is. Where it seems that with Megatron, he has this idol in, I think it's Sentinel Prime.
No, it's the previous Megatron. It's like,
oh, Megatronus.
Something like
that. Yes,
yeah.
It's like his idol in life. But they have this interaction eventually with Sentinel Prime, who is voiced by Jon Hamm. And it seems that he's so much more like elated to be in the presence of these people. And Optimus still is very, I'm trying to think of the right word. He just has like visions that he could be more than that. And Megatron kind of is just like, no, I'm just going to like we're in our place.
Yeah, exactly.
We're minors. This is who we are. So I like the build up after the fact, but I do agree. I think that the turning point kind of happens in a weird way. And then you're like, wait, what did he did he just flip a switch? Like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how it feels. But afterwards, and then you start to get the relationship built between Alita and Optimus. Alita is the female robot that's played by Scarlett Johansson. I think we both kind of feel similar about her character. How did you feel about Scarlett's performance or that character in general?
I think she's great in voice acting roles. I just think her character's very one note in this movie. And kind of by the end, when it's just like Optimus, her, and Bumblebee, like as the main trio, I'm kind of like,
I only care about Optimus.
I'm not really excited to see that more. I kind of want more of the just Optimus and Megatron stuff.
Yeah. No, I think that what so much of the good stuff in this movie is built on the relationship and the chemistry between the leads.
Yes.
Between Hemsworth and Tyree Henry. We also get some good supporting voice roles for Laurence Fishburne plays Alpha Trion, who's like this wise older transformer that like you said, it is an exposition dump, but when he's giving sort of the whole background of the lore of what actually came to be when Sentinel Prime turned his back on the whole rest of the primes.
Yeah.
What did you think about his role, and what did you think about Jon Hamm as Sentinel Prime? Because his character sort of plays a really major role in throughout the whole entire story as well with the film.
Yeah. I think Laurence Fishburne, great voice. Interesting part of the movie where we see the whoever they're at war with currently. What are they called? The Cytops or whatever.
That's not. It is kind of hard to keep up with. All
There's a lot of interesting names in here.
I actually it's not even on here.
Whoever they're at war with currently, that was like an interesting part of the movie, and I really love the shots, like the wide shots. I do love the animation in this. I forgot to mention that in my overall.
Yeah.
I do love the animation style here, and I think there are some really cinematic moments. I love the wide shots when the enemies show up to collect the energy source,
Yes.
and you see their huge ship, and the design of them is very like. It's like animatronic, but also organic. It's like mixed, which is pretty cool as like an enemy type. So I thought that whole portion is interesting, and I think it like sets stuff up for the future. That's really cool. Jon Hamm, the first hologram, I was like, this is the bad guy. Like the second he was like, I'm the only survivor. We're really trying to find new sources, but we can't find it. And I'm like, he did this, and they're like he's hiding the truth. He's good. He's good. Like I like Jon Hamm obviously, and he's good in the role. I wish there was a better. I wish they hit it better.
I was gonna say I think part of it, and I agree because he's done other voice roles, and I like Jon Hamm a lot. But I think there's something to the cadence in his voice too, where it just seems like he's playing that weasel type,
right? Yeah.
Which I wish they would, like you said, I wish they would hide that a little bit better, like they did. Something like, again, even Fishburne's character, like he's done turns where it's like you think he's going to be like a really good character in some things, and he turns his back on somebody. Like I think he could have been more effective in that role if you maybe even if you flip the two, that would have been interesting to me. I think they're both still good in their roles.
Now I'm thinking back to the moment where he says like, you can go to my personal like lodge or something, and they'll like take care of you, but then they fall down the hole and go to Bumblebee, but they make it seem like it was
the other guy,
guy. But now I'm thinking like it's because they came out of line, he set them up and put them down there.
Exactly.
So I think in the moment I was like,
there's actually a line of dialogue where like I think Optimus is trying to talk to him and he keeps cutting him off.
Right. Yeah.
Because he's like, you're one of the greatest miners we've ever seen, and then as soon as he's trying to like be like, yeah, and we're really big fan of it, he's like, no, it's all like, you guys are great. And
you guys should just go to talk to the other miners.
And it's like, all right, so. And I agree with you. I think that part of it is predictable. Let's talk about the animation a little bit.
Sure.
Because I know, like, so you are a huge fan of animation. I also love the medium and the genre. I just don't watch as much of it as you do. But we were looking up before we started recording. ILM actually did the animation for this film. And it said that the design was primarily influenced by Transformers Generation 1, which is what is the initial animated series that came out, as well as an Art Deco sort of design. I also was impressed with the animation as someone who's not like an animation junkie, but I appreciated that it actually felt different than the Spider-Man style, which I love, Spider-Verse, and Ninja Turtles, because the two of them, which are two of the more popular wide release animated films that have come out recently, they both kind of play with like that art pop style, and it feels like everything is hand drawn. And I do like that Paramount has both Transformers and Ninja Turtles, and they're able to acknowledge we need to have separate sort of visions for how we want these we want the animated worlds to kind of go.
Yeah.
So one scene that stood out to me, I really liked when they went on the train and they had those moments with the sunrise and all the animated creatures and things like that.
Yeah.
That was one that stood out to me. And the action, I thought, was really fluid and really clean.
Yeah.
Where I could see everything actually playing out instead of it being a mishmash sometimes.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated the action scenes in this, though I do like the action scenes in the live action movies. I mean, it's big budget, it's Michael Bay, you get it. This, I think they're really effective in the way that they do the action with the animation. What were some sequences that stood out to you, and what did you like about the animation?
Yeah, I really like the kind of the War of the Worlds type scene where they're on the surface and that big ship is kind of hovering and looking for them. I thought the cloud effects of the ship kind of dipping in and out, and you just see like the shadow of the ship going over. I thought that was just beautiful animation and very like gritty. The whole color palette just kind of falls off and it's very like dark and grim. And I think again, it's really cool, like foreshadowing the potential future enemy that we see more of. That scene really stood out, and yeah, I think just the lighting overall in this was really great because you have all those metallic surfaces, so the lighting's so important to get right, and I think they do a great job. And anything to just separate itself from other animated projects, you know, all Pixar movies, you know, no matter how great the story is, they all kind of look the exact same, and all the Disney animated movies kind of look exact same because they don't do any more 2D drawing, and yeah, now Spider-Verse and TMNT, they have now their own like style that movies are now going to start copying, like, oh, that like color pop kind of thing. So I appreciate that Transformers meant more for like a realism at like a art style. So that was really exciting to see.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the creative team behind the film. So Josh Cooley directs this. He only had previously directed Toy Story 4. Not sure if you've seen Toy Story 4 or not.
No, I never got to.
But he did write the script for Inside Out, the first Inside Out film.
Okay.
And he worked for Pixar before coming over to Paramount. The screenwriting team is a team of 3. Eric Pearson, who previously did Black Widow, Thor Ragnarok, and Godzilla vs. Kong. And then you have Andrew Bearer and, this is the craziest name, Gabriel Ferrari. So nuts.
Cool.
Ant-Man and the Wasp and No Exit. So
that was all the writing team?
That's the writing team.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was something I want to talk to you about. So I think it's interesting because I do think the emotional points, and I think you agree with it, like the emotional points actually hit
right
in a way that it really works. With all the Marvel projects that I just named and Godzilla vs. Kong, I don't think a lot of those movies were known for their scripts necessarily. They're actually some of the weaker Marvel projects that had come out. I love Ragnarok. I don't know your thoughts on Ragnarok.
I like it too.
But that also is so built in the Taika Waititi vehicle that it's interesting to me that. But I don't think Taika wrote that movie.
I thought he did write that movie. I thought that maybe
I gotta double check. But regardless, that's the creative team we have with this film. In hearing that, are you surprised with the direction they went in? And I feel like Paramount might have been like, we've seen these people be successful in another big franchise medium. We want to do the world building, and we want to build that out the best way possible. Because Ragnarok, at least for that one writer, Ragnarok kind of resets Thor. Like it kind of resets all of the lore of what came before that. Yeah. And it resets his whole entire world in a different way thematically, which they then shit on in Love and Thunder. But regardless, in hearing that, how did you feel about the direction of the project and the writing especially? And you can get into Bumblebee if you want at this point, because I know it's a point that you really didn't enjoy.
Yeah, well, I think the Pixar, the Toy Story, and then some of those other films you brought up, they all have very strong character work and very strong character arcs. And again, I think the ideas that they have, and some do come to fruition really well, like Optimus Prime, I think the character arcs in here are the strong points, but I think there's a lot of and then writing like going on in this movie, like this happens and then this happens and then this happens, like when they run into the Royal Guard in the middle of nowhere, like they get captured by the Royal Guard and then they're brought in front of Starscream, and then it's like, why are you guys just sitting out here? Like, what was the point of capturing these people and bringing them in? Like,
I understand.
I'm like, what is the point of this? It just feels like we have to have some action. So it's like, then this happens, and then this happens, and then they have a group, the High Council, the High Guard, to then as like a attacking force against Sentinel Prime. So it's like, I don't really understand how that all came together. They just needed like a group that said, we need a strong bot, and Megatron fits that archetype. So then Megatron takes over them. And then you already know Starscream is a Decepticon, you know, Soundwave or Shockwave is a Decepticon. So you know all of them are going to become Decepticons. So it was just like, I wish they just had a better reason for them to run into those people
instead of the convenience.
Yeah, so it just feels like, in one hand, the character writers are there, but maybe the plot writers and some of those other movies you mentioned are just kind of like, this is all happening because it has to happen because of the plot. That feels very here as well.
I think that's a really fair and strong criticism. I think that there is a lot of conveniences in terms of the way the characters are all intermingling with each other. I do feel like the thing is, those two central characters, I think they write really well. And I do think part of it is the chemistry and the performances more so than the writing, where ScarJo and Keegan-Michael Key's take on Bumblebee sort of go in two completely different directions. And like I had brought up earlier that I thought was a strong thing, it's cool to include all these Transformers, but you should have a real reason for why they're coming together and giving them real personalities and differences between who they are. Sentinel Prime, I think you get a little bit of that, but his personality is that he's a snake. Like that's really what it is, and I think again part of that is just the performance of Hamm. So I think that's a fair criticism. I think that the script is not necessarily the strongest thing. I think the direction, especially for someone coming from animation, I think that's why it's at least effective in my opinion of a movie. I mean, it could have been bad, right? Like this movie could have been really, really bad, which I think is another point to bring up because coming off of where they've come from previously with these live action movies. And how many Transformers have you seen?
I gotta say, like the first three. I don't even know if I saw three.
Okay. Did you see Bumblebee?
No.
I haven't seen Bumblebee either, but I've heard a lot of people seem to really like Bumblebee. But that's again an entirely different direction that they kind of went in with the franchise, and they didn't return to it, which people were pissed. They were like, "Why didn't we just continue this story? This worked well." But I think that there's such a bad stink on Transformers right now that this movie could have just been rinse and repeat in animation form that they've done previously. I appreciate that they took a swing on trying to do something different, even going back to sort of changing the origin of what everyone has known the Transformers to be. Right. You know, and I think that that's why it's effective with the relationship, as we've talked about, with Optimus and Megatron. And the direction works in that sense, but for other things, I think it kind of falls flat. I did like the score in this film.
I was just about to say the music's really good.
Do you want to talk about the music?
I liked it. It was really good.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it has really it just works really well throughout the whole entire film. Everything they're able to do with it. Talking about the financials, because you did bring it up earlier too, which I talked to you about before we started recording.
I paid $12 for this movie.
It has a $75 million budget, which in the grand scheme of things is not a crazy budget by today's standards for a blockbuster.
Yeah.
The sad reality is that it just came out I think it was the 17th. Might be wrong on that date.
20th? Does the 20th sound right?
20th is right. Ooh. It came out the 20th. We're recording this on the 24th.
Oh my God, it's been 4 days.
4 days.
You guys, you're all over it.
No,
it's made no money.
No, but I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why it's a problem. I'm going to tell you why it's a problem. I'm telling you, I know my box office.
Okay.
So a lot of people were predicting that, especially because of the marketing skewing younger, they thought this could have been a great opportunity for families to go to the theater and see it, because I don't think there's been a major animated release probably since Despicable Me. And Beetlejuice was entering its third week in the box office. I'm just looking to see. I mean, nobody went to go see Borderlands.
No.
So the last real something that could skew kids would probably be Despicable Me, which was in like June or July.
Right.
And Inside Out 2, which was months ago.
Yeah.
We're in the fall now. This is great. Beetlejuice in its third week of release, third weekend, made more money.
How much though?
How much more money did it make?
Just like how much money did it make?
In the third weekend.
Right. Yes.
I think it made $34 million compared to the 26 that Transformers made opening weekend.
Okay. Got it.
So Transformers now, the full box office that I had seen is that it's at $40 million against a $75 million budget. Now, the other part with that is that you have to include marketing in that.
Yes.
So they have to make probably at least $125 million to break even. Maybe $110 million, but they're at $40 million. And I understand it's only been the opening weekend, but that's when you get the most usually to go to the theater. I don't like its chances to profit much from this. And I think the sad part with that, which you talked about a little bit earlier, and this movie has 2 post-credit scenes and they're not anything elaborate, but they're trying to build towards the future of what they want to do in animation with this franchise. That's not going to do it. That's going to have them say, okay, we got to restart again, which they just did with live action. So when you hear that, I mean, how do you like? Again, I know you're like it's only been 4 days, but
Yeah, no,
we're 35 million under
I hear you.
budget,
Yeah.
and you have to include the marketing of that. So
Yeah. Well, I think the marketing was the problem. So that they better not make their money back, the marketing team, because they didn't do a good job. Because again, I think, like I said in the beginning, if this picked a side and said we're going full kids or we're going full mature, I think that would have helped, because if it went full mature, I think it would have gotten better reviews, and then more people would have been like, "Oh, this is like not just another Transformers movie. Like this is a whole new take. This is like a new generation. Like let's go and watch this." And I think that could have been huge. Um, it's unfortunate, like I said, that it's not gonna potentially make its money back, because I think this is a rare case, well, maybe not a rare case, but this is a movie where I'm like, I feel very strongly that the sequel of this movie will be a lot better than it's this one,
yeah,
because I think you'll have Megatron and his Decepticons, and then you'll have Optimus kind of coming into the role of leader of the planet. With the Autobots, and then you have that other faction, that the enemies that they're facing out there as well. You know, is Megatron fighting them? Is Megatron doing his own thing? Is Optimus focusing on Megatron or taking out the enemies? Like, I think there's a lot of interesting story beats that they could also, because they had to set up so many characters in this first one, now they can kind of just start digging into the world and everything else. And I think the sequels could be really great, and I would be excited to see sequels, but it is unfortunate to hear that it might not even happen.
yeah. I think it's you brought up the critical part of it too, which again, we're gonna go based on Rotten Tomatoes, but it is an aggregator, so be aware of that. That I mean, you can give a movie a 6 essentially, and it's technically fresh.
Yeah.
But according to Rotten Tomatoes, 88% from critics, 98 from audience. So a lot of people are loving this movie. I know you didn't love it as much as a lot of people did. I wouldn't love is strong, but I really did enjoy this movie a lot. And I hope that the word of mouth is strong enough that hopefully it can build over time. The one thing with animation is that it sometimes just keeps building and building and building with the shelf life. I mean, Inside Out 2, the box office was insane for that movie. It's like one of the highest grossing movies ever now. And that was, I mean, the first movie did well, but the second one blew everybody out of the water. So maybe people start to get more of that word of mouth about this movie and people go and check it out. But before we reveal our scores for this, I want you to go off on Bumblebee, because you did say that you're not a huge fan of Keegan-Michael Key's take on the character. And there's a specific reason why.
I like Keegan-Michael Key, but I thought his character was so annoying in this movie. I didn't laugh at one of his jokes. I think they tried to do such like low, like easy humor that is very like that Marvel-esque type of humor that we talk about all the time, and then he just becomes like this badass, but then he still has that annoying personality. And by the end of the movie, I'm just like not excited to see more of him, and I hope they tone him back in any sequels. But he kind of got an eye roll from me every time, and that whole badassatron thing. Oh my god! Every time he did it, I was like, "There's no way."
It didn't get any reaction from my audience, and I will say some of my audience actually did enjoy some of the humor, but that scene in particular, people were like,
come on,
come on. Like no, complete silence.
My theater was crickets every time he opened his mouth. Like there was no reaction to him. And yeah, the badassatron thing, I was just like how did that get through that many people? Like watching and screening, like, yeah, was that really, we're going with that?
I mean, Keegan-Michael Key, I feel like he's still in that, and it's interesting because I think he was on the press tour, he was actually interviewed about like Key and Peele, and he's like, we kind of went in different directions. And it's like, yeah, Jordan Peele's making like these high level horror films, and Keegan-Michael Key's kind of doing the same thing that he did on Key and Peele, which is not a problem. And they actually have a Key and Peele joke in the film when he says "Tron."
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so there are some moments. I think the humor worked a little bit more for me, but I can totally understand the character is completely tonally doesn't fit with the rest of the film and the direction the film goes in by the end.
Yeah.
I mean, you're having these heightened, sophisticated, emotional, and mature moments between Optimus and Megatron, as well as Sentinel Prime. And he's like, I have knife hands. And it's like, that's humor that like a little kid would be like, that's so funny. And it's like,
not now.
Yeah, this
Not
is
right
not
now.
this is not the time for this.
Yeah.
But overall, no, I had fun with this movie. I would definitely recommend seeing it in a theater because I do think also animation on a big screen is always more visually satisfying, and if it really plays as a spectacle, it plays up.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed this movie. I would see it again, and I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. I know you're probably a little bit lower than that. And
Yeah, a
that's
little
okay.
bit, a little bit. Yeah, I'll do a 6.5. I'm really bad at giving like scores, but I'll do like a 6.5. I enjoyed the voice acting, the animation. I really enjoyed. I like when animation tries new things, new styles, so I appreciate it for that. Like we said, the music was really good. I think there are really cinematic moments. The action's really good. But I think there are just plot points that are kind of just happening to happen, and I think some of the character switches are a little fast, and there's exposition. It's a little predictable. So for me, I just was maybe hoping for a bit more in each of those categories. And of course, I wish it just kind of leaned into the maturity. They have some curses in this movie for PG, and I feel like maybe there were conversations where they wanted to go that way, and some executive said, no, 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 bring that back.
Yeah.
We're getting the PG rating. So yeah, I'll do a 6.5.
Okay. Well, hopefully we get to continue on this journey with Transformers and the Transformers 1 going forward. As we both said in the review, we liked it enough that we would be excited for a potential sequel.
Yes.
So hopefully we get to see that. But let us know in the comments what your guys' thoughts were on Transformers 1. Are you guys a part of that crowd that's absolutely loving this movie? Again, 98% audience rating. So a lot of people really loving it. Are you more on the side of Mark, where you were a bit disappointed, but you still enjoyed it? Or did you outright hate this movie? We'd love to know, regardless, in the comments what your guys' thoughts are. Please be sure to give this video a like if you can, and subscribe to us down below. All of the social media for all of us is also down below. And if you guys didn't know, Mark and I cover all Star Wars stuff here on the channel. He also has his own Star Wars podcast, which will also be linked in the description.
Oh, you didn't have to do that.
But we're not going to be talking Star Wars probably until December. So we got some time, but
Yep.
we will cover Skeleton Crew eventually when that comes up, and you'll see Mark on the channel for other things as well. Just signing off, I am Darian Scalamoni.
I'm Mark Acabino.
And we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.